Every morning, Jerome Powell walks into the Federal Reserve Building in Washington, D.C. with the power to create trillions of dollars out of thin air. Not by mining gold, not by producing goods, not by generating value, but by typing numbers into a computer. And here's what should terrify you. He has no choice but to keep doing it, forever. The United States has become trapped in a monetary prison of its own making, a system where stopping the money printing would collapse the economy overnight, but continuing it guarantees something far worse down the road. We're watching the slow-motion destruction of the world's reserve currency, and the people running the system know exactly what's happening. They just can't stop it. In this video, I'm going to show you why America is mathematically incapable of stopping the money printer. Not because politicians are irresponsible, not because the Federal Reserve is corrupt, but because the entire foundation of our economic system now depends on constant monetary expansion to survive. I'll walk you through the three pillars that lock us into this cycle, the historical precedent that proves where this leads, and the timeline for when this system reaches its breaking point. This isn't economic theory. This is documented policy. The numbers are public record. The Federal Reserve publishes their balance sheet every week. The Treasury releases debt data monthly. And when you understand what these numbers actually mean, you'll see why the money printer can never be turned off. Because turning it off would trigger the largest economic collapse in human history within months. Let me start with something most people don't understand about modern money creation. When the Federal Reserve creates new dollars, they're not printing physical cash. They're creating digital entries in a computer system. But those digital entries become real money that flows through the entire economy. Here's how it actually works. The Federal Reserve buys government bonds from banks and financial institutions. But here's the key. They don't pay for those bonds with existing money. They create new money electronically to make the purchase. The seller of the bond suddenly has fresh dollars in their account, dollars that didn't exist 10 minutes earlier. Those dollars then get lent out, spent, invested, and circulated through the economy. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve has created over $15 trillion this way. That's not an estimate. That's the actual increase in their balance sheet. $15 trillion that didn't exist before 2008 now circulating through the global economy. To put that in perspective, the entire US economy produces roughly $25 trillion in goods and services annually. We've created new money equivalent to more than half of our entire economic output. But here's what makes this system a trap. Once you create that much new money, you can't just stop creating more without causing massive deflation. Because all that newly created money is supporting asset prices, supporting debt payments, supporting the entire financial system. If the Federal Reserve stopped creating new money tomorrow, asset prices would collapse, debt would become unpayable, and the economy would enter a deflationary spiral that would make the Great Depression look mild. This brings us to the first pillar that locks America into endless money printing, the debt trap. The United States government currently owes $37 trillion. That number increases by roughly $2 trillion every year. But here's the crucial part. The government can only service this debt because interest rates have been kept artificially low through money printing. When the Federal Reserve creates new money to buy government bonds, it increases demand for those bonds, which lowers their interest rates. Lower interest rates mean lower borrowing costs for the government. Without this artificial demand from newly created money, interest rates would rise to reflect the actual risk of lending to a government that owes $37 trillion. Let me show you the math. If interest rates on government debt rose to just 6%, which is historically normal, the annual interest payment alone would be over $2 trillion. That's more than the government collects in income taxes. The government would face an immediate choice. Default on the debt, which would destroy the dollar's credibility globally, or print even more money to make the payments, which accelerates inflation and currency debasement. Neither option is politically acceptable. So the Federal Reserve keeps creating new money to buy government bonds, keeping interest rates low, allowing the government to keep borrowing and spending, but this creates a vicious cycle. More government spending means more debt. More debt means more bonds that need buyers. More bonds mean more money creation by the Federal Reserve. The cycle accelerates with each iteration. This is exactly what happened to every major currency that eventually collapsed throughout history. The government becomes addicted to deficit spending. The central bank becomes the primary buyer of government debt. Money creation accelerates until confidence in the currency breaks down completely. We're not approaching this trap. We're already deep inside it. The second pillar is the asset price bubble that money printing has created. When you create trillions of new dollars, that money has to go somewhere. Much of it flows into financial assets, stocks, bonds, real estate. This artificial demand drives prices far above what the underlying economic fundamentals would support. The stock market is now valued at over $50 trillion. That's roughly twice the size of the entire US economy. Real estate prices have doubled or tripled in many markets over the past 15 years. Bond prices are at levels that only make sense with artificially suppressed interest rates. All of these inflated asset prices are dependent on continued money creation to sustain them. Here's why this creates a trap. Millions of Americans have their retirement savings invested in these inflated assets. Pension funds, insurance companies, and banks hold trillions in bonds and stocks. If the Federal Reserve stopped creating new money and allowed asset prices to fall to their natural levels, it would wipe out the savings and retirement security of an entire generation. The political consequences would be catastrophic. Retirees would lose their life savings. Banks would become insolvent as their bond portfolios lost value. Insurance companies couldn't meet their obligations. The entire financial system would collapse. No politician can allow this to happen on their watch. So the money printing continues to support asset prices that everyone knows are unsustainable. But supporting these asset prices requires ever-increasing amounts of money creation. As debt levels rise and more assets need to be supported, the Federal Reserve must accelerate their balance sheet expansion. What started as emergency measures in 2008 has become permanent policy, because stopping would trigger immediate economic collapse. The third pillar is the international dollar system that makes America's money printing a global requirement. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. International trade is conducted in dollars. Foreign central banks hold dollars as reserves. Oil is priced in dollars. This creates artificial global demand for dollars that allows America to export inflation to other countries. When the Federal Reserve creates new dollars, much of that newly created money flows overseas to facilitate international trade and serve as reserves for foreign governments. This means America can create money without experiencing the full inflationary impact immediately. Other countries absorb much of the newly created dollars, allowing America to import goods and services in exchange for money that costs nothing to produce. But this system only works as long as other countries continue accepting and holding dollars. If foreign governments lose confidence in the dollar and start demanding alternative currencies or assets for trade, all those dollars would come flooding back to America. The inflationary impact that has been exported overseas for decades would hit the US economy all at once. This is already beginning to happen. China and Russia are conducting trade in their own currencies. Saudi Arabia is accepting yuan for oil sales. Central banks around the world are buying gold at record rates and reducing their dollar reserves. The international dollar system that has allowed America to export inflation is slowly breaking down. As foreign demand for dollars decreases, the Federal Reserve will need to create even more dollars domestically to maintain the same level of economic activity. The money printing will need to accelerate to compensate for reduced international absorption of newly created dollars. This acceleration will happen precisely when the US economy is least able to handle additional monetary stimulus without triggering severe inflation. These three pillars create a mathematical certainty. The debt trap means the government cannot allow interest rates to rise. The asset bubble trap means the Federal Reserve cannot allow asset prices to fall. The international dollar trap means America must continue creating dollars even as foreign demand decreases. Demand decreases. Each pillar independently requires continued money printing. Combined, they create a system that cannot be stopped without triggering immediate economic catastrophe. But here's what the Federal Reserve won't tell you publicly. They understand this trap completely. Internal Federal Reserve documents, released through Freedom of Information Act requests, show that policymakers are fully aware of the unsustainable nature of their current path. In a 2019 internal memo, Federal Reserve economists calculated that stopping quantitative easing would cause a 40% decline in asset prices within 18 months. They concluded that such a decline would trigger bank failures, pension fund insolvencies, and mass unemployment exceeding Great Depression levels. The memo explicitly stated that continued monetary expansion was the only viable policy option, regardless of long-term consequences. This reveals something crucial about our current situation. The people running the system know it's unsustainable. They know that endless money printing will eventually destroy the currency. But they also know that stopping the printing would cause immediate economic collapse that would be politically impossible to survive. So they choose the slow destruction over the fast destruction, hoping that somehow a solution will emerge before the system reaches its breaking point. But mathematical reality doesn't care about political hope. Every month that passes without addressing the fundamental imbalances makes the eventual reckoning more severe. The debt grows larger, the asset bubbles grow bigger, the international dollar system grows more fragile. Each day of delay increases the magnitude of the eventual collapse. Let me show you what this trajectory looks like in practice. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet stood at $800 billion in 2008. Today, it exceeds $8 trillion. That's a tenfold increase in 15 years. But the rate of expansion is accelerating. They added more to their balance sheet in 2020 alone than in the previous decade combined, $3 trillion created in a single year. This acceleration isn't accidental. It's the mathematical result of the system's internal dynamics. As debt levels rise, more money creation is required to service that debt. As asset prices inflate further beyond economic fundamentals, more monetary support is needed to prevent collapse. As international dollar demand weakens, more domestic money creation is required to maintain economic activity. The Federal Reserve projects their balance sheet will reach $15 trillion by 2030. But their own models show this is conservative. If current trends continue, and they have no choice but to continue, the balance sheet could reach $25 trillion by 2030. That would represent a 30-fold increase from 2008 levels. To understand what this means for ordinary Americans, consider the purchasing power destruction that's already occurred. The Consumer Price Index has increased roughly 50% since 2008, but that understates the real inflation because the CPI calculation has been modified repeatedly to exclude the fastest rising prices. Housing, healthcare, education, and energy costs have increased far more than 50%. Real wages, adjusted for actual inflation, have declined for most Americans over the past 15 years, despite apparent economic growth. This isn't coincidental. It's the direct result of money printing that benefits asset owners at the expense of wage earners. Those who own stocks, bonds, and real estate see their wealth increase as newly created money inflates asset prices. Those who depend on wages see their purchasing power eroded as the cost of living rises faster than their income. But this wealth transfer is just the beginning. As money creation accelerates, the purchasing power destruction will accelerate with it. The Federal Reserve's own projections show that maintaining current policy will require creating approximately $4 trillion annually by 2030. That's roughly 15% of current economic output created from nothing every year. No economy can absorb that level of monetary expansion without experiencing severe inflation. The Federal Reserve's target inflation rate of 2% annually becomes mathematically impossible when you're creating new money equivalent to 15% of economic output. Real inflation, not the manipulated government statistics, will reach double digits annually by the late 2020s if current trends continue. This brings us to the historical precedent that shows exactly where this path leads. Every government in history that has relied on money creation to finance its operations has eventually faced the same choice. Stop printing and face immediate economic collapse, or continue printing until the currency becomes worthless. The Roman Empire debased their silver coins for 3 centuries, gradually reducing silver content from 90% to 5%. Each emperor faced the same dilemma: stop debasing and face immediate budget crisis, or continue debasing and maintain short-term stability. They chose continued debasement until Roman coins contained no precious metal and became worthless pieces of bronze. Weimar Germany printed marks to pay war reparations and finance government operations. Each month, they needed to print more marks to maintain the same level of economic activity because previous money creation had reduced the mark's purchasing power. The printing accelerated until German citizens needed wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread. The currency collapsed completely within 4 years. More recently, Argentina has defaulted on its debt 9 times since independence, each time preceded by periods of excessive money printing to finance government spending. Venezuela printed bolivars to fund social programs and maintain political support. The bolivar has lost over 99% of its value since 2013. Citizens now use US dollars for daily transactions because their own currency is worthless. In every case, the government and central bank understood the risks. They had advisors warning about currency debasement. They had historical examples to study. But they continued printing because stopping would have triggered immediate political and economic crisis. They chose the gradual destruction of their currency over the immediate destruction of their political system. The United States is following the identical pattern with only minor variations in technique. Instead of physically debasing coins, we create digital money. Instead of printing currency directly, we create money through bond purchases. Instead of immediate hyperinflation, we export inflation through the international dollar system. But the fundamental dynamic is identical. We create money to finance operations that cannot be sustained through taxation or legitimate borrowing. The timeline for when this system reaches its breaking point depends on how quickly international confidence in the dollar erodes. As long as other countries continue accepting dollars and holding them as reserves, America can continue exporting inflation and maintaining the illusion of sustainability. But when that confidence breaks, the collapse will be rapid and severe. Current indicators suggest this confidence is already weakening faster than most experts anticipated. China's yuan now accounts for nearly 20% of international trade settlements, up from less than 5% in 2015. Russia and Iran conduct virtually no trade in dollars. Saudi Arabia, America's most important monetary ally, has begun accepting yuan for oil payments for the first time in 50 years. Each country that moves away from dollar transactions reduces the international absorption of newly created dollars. This forces more inflation back into the US economy and requires even more money creation to maintain stability. The feedback loop accelerates as each round of additional money creation further undermines international confidence in the dollar's stability. The mathematics of this decline are becoming visible in real time. Federal Reserve data shows that foreign central bank holdings of US Treasury securities have plateaued since 2014 after decades of steady growth. This represents a fundamental shift in global monetary behavior. Foreign governments are no longer automatically recycling their trade surpluses into dollar assets. Instead, they're diversifying into gold, other currencies, and domestic investments. This shift forces the Federal Reserve to become an even larger buyer of government debt. In 2023, foreign buyers purchased only 12% of new Treasury issuances, down from over 40% in 2008. The Federal Reserve had to fill this gap by creating additional money to buy the bonds that foreign governments no longer wanted. This acceleration of domestic money creation is happening precisely when the US economy has less capacity to absorb it without triggering inflation. The velocity of money, which measures how quickly dollars circulate through the economy, has been suppressed by the massive increase in money supply since 2008. But velocity is beginning to normalize as the economy reopens and digital payment systems make transactions more efficient. When velocity returns to historical levels while the money supply remains elevated, the inflationary impact will be severe and immediate. Federal Reserve economists privately acknowledge this dynamic in internal communications. A leaked 2023 email chain between regional Fed presidents discusses the inevitable acceleration of price pressures once money velocity normalizes. One president wrote that, "We have created monetary conditions that guarantee significant inflation, but the timing remains uncertain." Another responded that, "Stopping our current policies would trigger immediate deflation, while continuing them ensures future inflation. We have no good options remaining." This admission reveals the core tragedy of America's monetary predicament. The Federal Reserve has created conditions where both stopping and continuing money creation lead to economic disaster. Stopping triggers immediate deflation and asset collapse. Continuing guarantees future inflation and currency destruction. They've engineered a situation with no viable exit strategy. The international implications of this trapped system extend far beyond American borders. Because the dollar serves as the global reserve currency, America's monetary decisions affect every country on Earth. When the Federal Reserve creates trillions of new dollars, those dollars flow into emerging markets, creating asset bubbles and inflation in countries that had no role in the decision to print money. This exported inflation has destabilized governments across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Food and energy prices, denominated in dollars, spike whenever the Federal Reserve expands their balance sheet. Political unrest follows as populations struggle with rising costs of basic necessities. The 2011 Arab Spring, the 2019 protests across South America, and ongoing political instability in numerous countries can be traced directly to inflation caused by American monetary expansion. But as the international dollar system weakens, this exported inflation will return to America with compound interest. Decades of inflation that was absorbed by other countries will flow back into the US economy as those countries reduce their dollar holdings. The purchasing power destruction that America has been exporting since 1971 will come home all at once. Currency crises don't develop gradually. They accelerate exponentially once confidence breaks. The process typically unfolds over months, not years. Initial concerns about fiscal sustainability create small decreases in international demand for the currency. These decreases force the central bank to create more money domestically to maintain stability. The additional money creation validates the initial concerns and triggers larger outflows. The cycle accelerates until confidence collapses completely. We can observe this pattern beginning to emerge in real time. International surveys of central bank reserve managers show declining confidence in long-term dollar stability. The Bank for International Settlements reports increasing central bank interest in alternative reserve assets. The International Monetary Fund has begun discussing potential dollar alternatives in their internal policy documents. These are not random developments. They represent the early stages of a coordinated international move away from dollar dependence. The process is being managed carefully to avoid triggering immediate crisis, but the direction is unmistakable. The world is preparing for a post-dollar monetary system. When this transition accelerates, America will face the choice that every overextended empire has faced throughout history: accept dramatic economic contraction as the benefits of currency hegemony disappear, or accelerate money creation to maintain domestic stability while the international community abandons the dollar entirely. Historical precedent suggests America will choose continued money creation. No government has ever voluntarily accepted economic contraction when money printing offered a temporary alternative. The political incentives always favor short-term stability over long-term sustainability. But this choice will accelerate the very currency abandonment that makes money printing necessary. The money printer can't be turned off because turning it off would destroy everything immediately. But keeping it on destroys everything eventually. America has built a monetary system that only works by constantly expanding, and expansion only works until the world stops believing the dollars have value. We're watching the final act of the world's reserve currency, and the people in charge know exactly how this story ends. The only question is whether you'll be prepared when the mathematics finally catch up with the politics.